Hello, viewers. Hope everyone's doing great. As we are unlocking, I think we are able to probably feel the freedom. And while we are feeling so, I think immunity and infection, these words are becoming more and more important. It is observed that immunity, infection, and then, of course, nutrition along with it is becoming the buzzwords and probably who Googled the most. So how do we really prepare to unlock is probably the question comes to our mind, and for some it's probably just not a question they are getting out. So however, to address this critical issue, we are all we have a great speaker with us today, Dr. Amit Saraf. He's, of course, MD FRCP, and he's practicing at the Jupiter Hospital. In a bit, I will give his detailed introduction. But we are really looking forward to this session. And I know quite a few of the viewers have also told me already that they are looking forward to this important session. But to give you a quick customary prelude of True Wealth. True Wealth is an integrative healthcare initiative guiding patients and healthy individuals to overcome their healthcare concerns and manage self-help to reach the ultimate goal of holistic health and happiness. True Wealth aims to help you separate science from hype by sharing authentic knowledge and wisdom from healthcare and nutrition stalwarts so you can make the right health and nutrition choices. TrueWealth's ultimate goal is to provide integrative and personalized health and nutrition advice to achieve health and happiness. A quick note about the live program. It is organized to give you more information and guidance to keep health, nutrition, and fitness during the lockdown. The recommendations made by the speaker or the other participants cannot be treated as consultation. For personalized consultation, you can reach the consultants on 9820048369 or visit our website www.truewealth.in. You can also ask your questions by calling on 9820048369, or you can type in your questions into the Facebook live chat box. You can feel free to ask as many questions and concerns that you can have, and we will of course, try to do more than justice. However, please note that this program is not intended to provide any information on COVID-19 and related treatment. You should approach hospitals and doctors assigned by authorities to get authentic information on COVID-19. Uh, with that, I will not even waste a single second to introduce our today's esteemed speaker, Dr. Amit Saraf. He is the Director, Department of Internal Medicine, Jupiter Hospital, Thane. He has been the consultant, physician, and DNB coordinator in Jupiter Hospital since the inception. Uh, he is MD FRCP London, Edinburgh, Glasgow, and he's FACP USA, FCPS. So, see the amount of course, the degrees and the expertise that he has. He's, of course, and also very important, or rather, very effort-oriented job that he has been doing, that he is the MRCP examiner and ex-associate professor of medicine, MUHS. He is the ex-assistant professor at Terna Medical College, FCPS medicine teacher, examiner, and council member. He has trained in internal medicine and neurophysiology at Hammersmith Hospital and NIN in London. First in all 3 years, distinctions and awards in MBBS. He has worked as reviewer for the BMJ, that is the British Medical Journal. So that's a very short, sweet, but a very extensive, deep expertise, experience that he brings to us today. And we are very thankful to you, Dr. Amit Saraf, for joining on with us on this session, which is very, very, I think, critically important in today's situation. So over to you, really, if you would like to say a few words to the viewers, and then all that you want to sort of, as a teacher, how to do it day in day out. So tell us what immunity is really, because
Well,
some of us have probably forgotten it in our textbooks, and some of us do not know as much. So
thank you, Rajeshri. Before I do all of that, we have some time to speak on immunity nutrition, but I
yeah,
would take this platform and this stage to compliment Rajeshri, her team, Mahesh, and the entire team of True Wealth. I have been following their efforts for some time now, and I would want to bring it to the notice of everybody that a true impartial academic platform by a company is rarely seen today. They have been doing this not today, not yesterday, for some time. COVID times, lockdown times have been one scenario where they have really put in the effort, but it's been in the past. Rajeshri's father was a stalwart in the pharma industry, and she is stepping into his shoes. I see a very bright future for her in the years to come. And I would thank them, especially Rajeshri, for this platform, because it is the only way in the current times where people like us, our only intention is to bring proper knowledge to the table. So try to get away the anxiety, concern, and fear out of people, because today knowledge is power. So the more authentic information all of us get, the more sort of powerful we become, the less the fear factor. That is the purpose of all these meetings, and they have been doing it for like the last 2 months tirelessly. I mean, every single day I see her name, and she's been hosting stalwart
yeah,
speakers and absolutely great academicians. So, firstly, thanks Rajeshri, thanks Mahesh, and thanks the entire team you guys for
yeah.
this stupendous effort.
Thank you so much for that appreciation. I think that coming from you is sort of important for us, because initially I can tell you that it took us, I had a hard time breaking in through people absolutely trying to understand that this is non-commercial. It is something which is for people's interest. And yeah, over a period, people have really realized that, this was an effort coming from the bottom of our heart. And I would say my primary focus and worry from the beginning has been you all. I mean, in the few slides that I have, we really care for you, because you are the front fighters for us, not just now, but we have always seen this, and we all have to appreciate that and care for you. So I think that was the first objective, and the second one, of course, was educating people so that we can sort of protect them from all that we can. Thank you again.
So thank you, Rajesh. So on that note, I would begin this topic from the very first page, which Rajeshri has tried to say that the frontliners. Now, I don't want to make it a too theoretical topic or too scientific topic. I'll tell you in simple words what I do. I'll tell you in simple words what my colleagues do. I'll tell you in simple words what the frontliners do. So if we have been doing it and we are here today to talk to you, that means something that we've been doing in our lifestyle is working for us. And then we just want to share that knowledge. If you also do, hopefully it will work for you as well. So before we get down to the actual ways to boost up immunity, first let's get down to a little of what it is all about, and let's get down to the physiology first. So immunity, by definition, we are all organisms. Some of they are single cellular organisms, like COVID-19 virus are single cellular, and we are a multicellular. But we all have a defense line against everything. It can be against allergy, against organisms, against a foreign threat, against an internal threat. So our defense line is defined as immunity in simple words. Like India has a army, so our Indian army is the defense line at the front. So our defense is the immunity which we all possess. Having said that, broadly, it has been, I mean, there are many, many, many ways you can classify immunity, but to put it in simple words, you have two kinds of immunity: innate and acquired. So innate is something which is inborn. You hear things like somebody gets wet in the rain all the time and does not really develop cough, cold, and fever that often, and somebody just has a simple cold water or goes once in the rain and will come back with cough, cold, fever. Or somebody eats outside all the time and doesn't really develop upset stomach, and somebody eats once in a while and develops. So why is that? Is because we all possess what is known as a innate immunity, which is a buildup of our genetic makeup, what comes through our genes, our DNA, our family background, environmental background. So innate immunity. And acquired is basically what we acquire. We'll touch upon that also, because herd immunity is a very sort of well-known word in the present time. So how do we acquire this immunity? So primarily for the viewers, we have innate and we have acquired immunity. Going one step further, both of them can be acquired either passively or either through active. So it's active and passive immunity for either of them. So what do these words mean? That's sub classification now. So passive means, I can give you examples such as a mother, when she is bearing a child in a uterus, that is a time she's passing certain immunity, certain defense mechanism to the child. That's straight away a passive. The child is not really building up the immunity on his or her own. It's being given by the mother. That's passive for you. Another example would be, now is the time in COVID, everybody hears about immunoglobulins, plasma therapy. So that's passive immunity for you. That somebody who's outlived COVID-19 has enough soldiers in his own system, in his own blood, those defense material. So if his blood is drawn and given to somebody else as plasma, then that's giving just automatic sort of passive immunity to that individual. That's another example of passive immunity. Acquired is something where the body has to do something to acquire immunity. And the examples of that are, for example, vaccinations. We've all been vaccinated. So when we are given a vaccine, what does a vaccine primarily mean? We are given the organism without its fangs and teeth, in simple words. So BCG vaccine, diphtheria vaccine, cholera, and so many of the vaccines which we all have been having from childhood are actual organisms, but without their fangs and teeth. In other words, without their infective ability. So when they are introduced in the body, the host can then see that this is a foreign thing, and we have to develop immunity against this organism, and that's how we become immune towards that particular organism. That's called acquired immunity. That's one example. Other acquired immunities can be through proper infections. It's like measles. Somebody gets measles in childhood. Somebody gets chickenpox in childhood. Somebody gets some other infections in their adult life also, for that matter. So we develop a little of immunity towards that. Having said that, mind you, once you're in a way infected, that does not make you immune for life. I mean, I hear questions in my OPD that if once I have dengue, is it lifelong immunity? It's not so. You, in fact, can still have it in certain organisms. So that brings me to the other part. So if you've understood what is innate and acquired and what is active and passive arms of immunity, then we come down to the other subset then of immunity. Is we have a T cell immunity and a B cell immunity. So again, not wanting to sound too technical and too intelligent about it, because we doctors love to use big words, and sound very so want to sound very impressive about it, but it's not so. Let's break it down and make it as simple as possible. So T cell immunity is primarily, as I was about to say, the memory kind of immunity, where, for example, if I develop typhoid, and the next time I may still develop typhoid, but my T cells, those are a type of cells in my system, will recognize that this is the same organism like last time we had encountered and we had fought. So this time when the second exposure happens, they are much more sort of ready to take on. It's no longer a hidden threat. You understand? Like sometimes it's an invisible enemy or a hidden threat is difficult for the army to target and find out and then attack. But if the enemy is known, if the threat is known, it's much easier to launch an attack. So that's T cell arm of the immunity, which is basically a kind of a memory immunity. And the B cell is known as the humoral immunity, where you hear words like immunoglobulin. So IgG, IgM, other common words which most of us have heard from laboratories when they test our blood for these things. So that basically means antibodies which develop against the organism. That's the humoral or the B cell arm of the immunity. So going at the molecular level, that's how these two aspects work. Let me address at this point the entire concept of herd immunity, and everybody is sort of talking about it nowadays. So herd immunity is a concept where 70% of the population has to be infected to transmit immunity to the rest of the 30-35%. So in simple words, whether it's a household of 10 people, whether it's a house with society of 100 people, whether it's a complex of 10,000 people, or a city of a lakh of people, the statistics remain the same, that 70% of that house or that society or that complex or that city or that state or nation has to become sort of infected with any of the organisms in the air, and they have to develop immunity. I'm not talking about the unfortunate mortality which happens of those who get infected. They can't really pass on the benefit to the others. But if 70% of the organisms of the person, sorry, who've got in touch with the organism have developed immunity against the organism, and they have survived the infection, those 70% can then transmit in a way infection and the healthy immunity to the rest of 30-35%. And that's how the epidemic ultimately comes to a negligible spread, and that's how we all benefit. That's a concept of herd immunity. So this is a bit about the background of immunity. I would want Rajeshri to shed some light at this point upon the nutritional aspect of how do we, sort of take part in, because now we've understood what's immunity all about, the background of it. She talks a bit about the nutrition, and then maybe I come back and from my end, given a little of inputs beyond nutrition, how do we boost up the immunity? And then towards the end, we both can then take in questions or whatever.
I think absolutely. And your physician input also on the nutrition side will be valuable, because right now, with immunity, I think nutrition has become totally congruent sort of with it, because, I used to keep saying, and I know I've bugged all of you by saying that when drugs don't work, yeah, that is the time you have to, nutrition sort of works.
True.
And that's kind of coming to our resort today. But however, having said that, and I will project a few slides, having said that, I think it doesn't mean that we can start popping pills of nutrition and then, it's just going to save us from all this. So it is again like the immunity, as so very in depthly and in very easy words, Dr. Amit has really explained to us. I think it must be very, very clear to all of us. And we are also getting some inputs from the viewers saying that good to know all these details. But having said that, if you see the slide, along with infections, what we are observing is the autoimmune diseases and the lifestyle diseases, and those are on the growth path. So if you see 1, 2, 3, really, they are very, very apparent that these are the lifestyle autoimmune diseases, and the antivirals which we see in the growth in terms of drugs and nutritional formulations world over. That's how the sales are growing, is because those are apparently needed. So for us, what's most important to understand is what we are really. We are the genes that we got from our parents, ancestors, and then the environment and plus nutrition. So that's what makes us what we are, which also Dr. Amit explained that, we can't tell why one gets the infection and the other doesn't. So in the current scenario, the genes, they're absolutely not alterable. The environment, we know we cannot change right now at all. So what really can help is nutrition. And epidemiological studies have shown that, if you're poorly nourished, you are at a greater risk of bacterial, viral, and other infections very easily. So if you see, there are also certain observations that, certain dietary patterns may better prepare the body for microbial attacks and excess inflammation as well. And some of these pictures would be familiar for you because a lot of them actually exist in our kitchen. And what is important so to do is over a period to have a balanced diet, and you have to choose proteins with low fat, fat-free dairy foods. You have to also choose lean meats, red meat we should stay away from, nuts, peas, seeds. All this we should be having. We should consume good amount of vegetables of different color, especially the dark greens, oranges, purples. They're all good colors that we should be consuming. And of course, fats, don't completely shy away from them, but good fats are also always welcome, which is fish, nuts, flax seeds, and vegetable oils. And we need to also hydrate ourselves. So when we talk about proteins, it is extremely important that proteins should be, they of course help in building the immunity, but also they help us get energy. So these are two factors proteins actually suffice. But what we need to make sure is we should eat different types of proteins, so we do get the crucial amino acids when they break down. And those are the critical ones here, which I've pointed some of them out, is glutamine, arginine, isoleucine, leucine, valine. And there are studies which show that, they help in improving cellular immune function, fight infections, also increase help in recovery, and also reduce hospital stays. So proteins are, that's why, extremely important. Vitamins, again, we are hearing a lot now. Vitamin C, every second person is, very inquisitive about vitamin C. So, but is it only vitamin C? Maybe not. We need to take the vitamin minerals also. They should be complementary to each other, because their uptake, really a lot of minerals uptake is dependent on the vitamins as well. So the right vitamins, and not having too much of it all as well. So we need to correct our vitamin mineral deficiencies, and there are several foods, and these are some of the ones which are marked very important right now as the immunity nutrients and food. So here are some which I have actually put down, and vitamin C appears to be able to both prevent and treat infections by enhancing various immune cell functions. This has been observed over a period. It's not just during the COVID, but overall. And beneficial effects of vitamin C on recovery in pneumonia have also been noted. So also vitamin C is being used in treatment right now. So it also has another role that, it has an effect on scavenging as well as regeneration of vitamin E. So very important again, because vitamin E is another very important ingredient for immunity. And what vitamin E particularly does, it is important to for the immune function, and it also has a role of an antioxidant and a cell membrane constituent. So a lot of people know about vitamin C, but vitamin E also is a very important vitamin if you have read and known about it. So that's one thing which I would like to share. And apart from that, that's where I said, the caveat is that mega dosing of micronutrients, which is vitamin minerals, it can be hazardous, especially in the geriatric population where, we are seeing too much of fear. So it's very important that you take it with a guidance, or do not normally go for very high doses unless it's really needed therapeutically, but keep taking it over a period if you have deficiencies in the under the RDA, that is regular daily allowance levels that are there. Meet them, don't go beyond them. And if you see, there are we have heard about zinc, iron, vitamin E, together sort of, they can really help in curbing immunity. Excuse me. So combinations of vitamins, minerals like vitamin C and E offer a great benefit. That's why combinations are necessary. Additional supplementation with zinc and roughly 30 milligram per day is sort of suggested right now. But again, please do not do any self-medication on your own. And with vitamins A, D, K, also minerals like selenium, copper, iron, they play a role in enhancing the immunity. So quite a few of these vitamin minerals can actually help us guard ourselves. And at the same time, hydrating yourself, so a combination of vitamins and the electrolytes and mineral salts together, if they are taken with water, it helps keeping hydration. And hydration is extremely important because it's still very hot out there. But apart from that, also a lot of in a lot of the early cases, even in the west, hydration was something which was focused on, and combinations of electrolyte and vitamins was focused on again. And if you see, if like I mentioned earlier, proteins, so the amino acids, arginine, glutamine, along with my favorite omega-3, which I will go towards the end, it's important. And this is my slide for Dr. Amit and all this fraternity, that you are sort of working relentlessly for us, and it is extremely important for all of you also to focus on yourself, because through your hectic routines, and I'm sure there are quite a few doctors also listening into the show. So these are the three important things, sir, like I said, you all should actually hydrate yourself, and also make sure that proteins and vitamins are properly complemented to foods. If not, then go on to supplementation, but not always necessary that you need supplementation. The other thing which is extremely important is gut health, because you may eat everything, but if it's not getting digested well, then it's of no use. So you need to have foods which will help in digestion, keep the acidity levels under control, and also, of course, the pancreatic enzymes, which I stress on, which you can get through fruits and raw vegetables or supplementation. They are extremely necessary for the complete digestion of your food. So that's important. And then why again gut health is important, because 70% of our immunity lies in the gut. So there are trillions of good bacteria and bad bacteria. So the balance has to stay, and for that, pre and probiotics are being researched, but we can consume them in the form of yogurt, apple cider vinegar, eat fiber rich foods, so that no matter how many bacteria you have in your you may consume through a supplementation also. If they have to grow into very big numbers, you need it is observed that fiber rich foods help in doing so. So it's also observed that diets that are limited in variety and lower in nutrients, consisting primarily of processed foods, can negatively affect a healthy immune system. It is also believed that a diet high in refined sugar, red meat, low in fruits, vegetables, they can promote disturbances in the healthy intestinal microorganisms, resulting in chronic inflammation of the gut and associated suppressed immunity. So we should consume the rainbow color of foods, so that we get wide spectrum of nutrients. That is extremely important. Apart from that, the quick last important things that I would want to mention is oxidative stress and chronic inflammation. These are silent killers, and these are the reasons for getting the autoimmune and the lifestyle diseases also. And what happens is interrelated. These also affect our body's strength to fight the infections. And what we are observing is comorbidities are a result of that, and we're seeing that more number of patients are we're losing them because of these comorbidities. So this is what oxidative stress looks like. What it does to the apple, it does to our body cells, and you can see how many different ways that our inflammation and oxidative stress can actually be detrimental towards our body. So you see that brain, lung, of course, kidneys, heart, skin, everything gets affected, and importantly, also the immune system gets affected with it. Another reason also, which is observed these days, is the mental uh, framework that we have, and how much fatigue free can we stay. The chronic fatigue syndrome is a new syndrome which happens due to too much of anxiety and depression, and which is something which we are probably experiencing right now. So fibromyalgia, irritable bowel syndrome, all this together can sort of also affect our immunity. So that is the reason why we need to make sure that we eat the balanced diets, and I will recap them at the end also. But for all that, I think there are some good anti-inflammatory agents. One of which is my favorite is omega-3 fatty acids, and it helps the body in various ways by fighting inflammation. It helps fight cancers, various types of diseases like cardiovascular disease, which is extremely important. It's important in diabetics, and some of the other ingredients. I already have questions on ashwagandha coming up, and which is Withania somnifera. So if you see, all these ingredients sort of bring down the inflammation in multiple ways in our body. So also eating a balance of alkaline and acidic foods, this can actually keep the inflammation lower in our body, and our spice cabinet can also help in the same. So that's a little bit from my end. I mean, I know it was extensive, but I hope that has given you some overview, and more detailed questions we can take, or you can, of course, consult us later on if you need so. So I think on that front, I think back to Dr. Amit. I mean, I don't know what your views are. What have your experiences been? Have you been practicing all these kind of things in your everyday practice as well? At least some of it that you have been doing, hydrating yourself and trying to take care of yourself. What have you been doing, and what would you sort of any other factors which you think the viewers should take note of, so that they don't have to visit you more often, at least for these reasons.
I, I think that's the best way. If you don't want to come to a doctor, you should follow what Rajeshi has just mentioned. I want to compliment her on a very crisp but a very comprehensive kind of a slideshow, because everything which is essential was put there. Uh, I would want to sort of break it down a bit and tell you a little. As she asked that do I do it, and if you remember right in the beginning of this talk, I mentioned that doctors, as frontliners, I just want to share with everybody today what we do and how we keep ourselves safe. So my father was a doctor, and what I'm sharing today is actually a fact. When we were small children, and we used to, at the end of the day on the dinner table, he used to me and my brother used to be sitting, and my mother and father, and in front of us he used to ask my mother, did he, and he used to count off, okay, and this is again a real life story, I'm not making this up. So he used to count off that had the two of them had their glass of milk, had they had their fruit a day, had they had their almond walnut a day, had they had their sunlight a day, had they had some exercise today, and how much of water. So today I see the logic of that. I see, when I am a father now, when I have a young daughter, and whatever Rajeshri has said, actually speaking, to make it very simple, to
Yeah.
take it forward from what my parents used to always ask me, and if and in those days, if we had not done these five or six things, I remember a birthday, I didn't get a gift because I had done probably some of the above items, none of them, or something I had missed out, and dad had said that today nothing, you will not have any enjoyment, because his logic was that obviously you need to get in the way, get wet in the rain, you obviously need to eat outside, obviously you need to, as children, sort of play in the mud and enjoy life as it is. But if you have these basic things to begin your life, begin your day, sorry, then you have the ability to fight off whatever challenges the day is going to throw at you. So today, as a father, as a doctor, as a family man, I begin my day with a glass of milk. I pop into almond walnuts in my mouth when I'm rushing out to work. I carry a fruit with me. I munch it along the way. At least on a weekend, I try to get some sunlight, if not every single day. And I have some salads and vegetables on a daily basis. So, why these five? What are these five going to achieve? So, whatever Rajeshri has told us, so milk is calcium, sunlight is vitamin D3, almond walnut is your E and your B12, salads are your fiber, vegetables are your minerals. Now, couple all of that with water, because I see a lot of people taking water for granted. Water is not really had in a measured item. So, what I would propose is first have a bottle to yourself, a liter's bottle to yourself. We all drink water, but then from a glass or a tumbler, we don't know how much liters we are consuming a day. So, first keep a bottle. Whenever you're thirsty, try to consume only from that single bottle and refill it, so you know how many liters you're consuming. Secondly, water always should be at an arm's length. So whether it's a homemaker or whether it's an office person, on your table or on your platform or wherever you are, if you have water, a water's bottle there all the time, so it reduces the effort of getting up and then going for it, which actually in practical term reduces your intake altogether. If you have a bottle there and then just sip on it every half an hour, 1 hour, and that's how easily the consumption goes on. So that's water. So and couple that with exercise. Half an hour, 45 minutes of walk
Yes.
is extremely important to boost up immunity. So that, and somewhere in Rajesh's slide she had covered a bit of stress. So if we need to de-stress, see, do not take stress is extremely a ridiculous statement. If I tell a 10th standard boy don't be stressed about the exam, I think he'll fail or probably not do to his optimal potential.
Right.
As a doctor, if I am not stressed or worried about somebody's health, maybe I'll underperform. So stress is an integral part of performance. We need to be a little stressed about our work to give the best performance. But how do we come back home and unwind, or sort of decrease the stress component is what is the key here. So for that, it can be individual. Anybody can figure out a way which unwinds him or her, which can be music, which can be yoga, which can be meditation, which can be again a walk. An exercise is brilliantly de-stressing. Can be laughing all the time, smiling all the time, joking all the time. So that helps really a lot in de-stressing. So these keys: nutrition, exercise, and de-stress is what is immunity all about. It's not a secret. It's known. It is what was practiced by our forefathers somewhere in 21st century. I think we've given it up. Therefore we have these viruses coming along our way: H1N1 and swine flu and then bird flu and now COVID-19. So if our lifestyle has taken for a toss, then somewhere these immunity lowering things, then well, more of infection catch hold of us. So I think from the two of us, this is what was in a nutshell for today's talk. I think we're ready for questions if they are.
Yeah. So, of course, we did get a very deep understanding into immunity, but right now, I have questions as to, does vitamin C really work? Is the is the whole thing everyone has been asking, and we of course know the science behind it. There are quite a few studies also that have been conducted, but is that really the observation? Because this morning only there was a forward going, of course, coming from a couple of elite doctors. We don't know if that's the right source, but people saying that we need to consume zinc, and it's been used as treatment as in vitamin C, zinc, vitamin E. Have you been using any of it, or what's your experience been? I know, because we can't sort of claim it like any other drug, but would that sort of give any support for people who are going to go out now and will have to sort of expose themselves to this kind of infections?
My take is on this is all these micronutrients are always good. There is no research which can deny this. I mean,
Yeah.
more than the research, it's a lifestyle which is proven. People used to squeeze a lime in their food in the earlier days. Even now we do it. Or people used to have a tall glass of buttermilk. People
Yeah.
used to have a fruit a day, sunshine, almond walnut. So these micronutrients and all these components have worked over the centuries, and I believe more than science, it's the experience which has backed them up. So I look upon their use in two aspects: prevention and therapeutic. Prevention, as I mentioned, if whatever I said a few minutes ago, if we start consuming in our daily lifestyle that fruit, that almond walnut, that sunlight, then we are obviously preventing ourselves from infections. Therapeutic, yes, in today's time, because coming to COVID-19 or most of the other infections, giving them, especially for therapeutic purposes, helps because we give it like as a supportive therapy to the mainline drugs. Because giving them, it's like the way I see it is, whether they will benefit by giving in the form of tablets or injections, I do not know. But then will they harm the patient? Definitely not. That's the way I see it. That by giving it, I'm not causing any harm. If they benefit,
Correct.
wonderful. So that's how we use these micronutrients in both the ways.
Yeah, because there are ample number of questions more on the nutrients itself. There's another question if curcumin is another thing which is being researched, and I know a lot of companies have come up with curcumin products. What has your experience been? Has there been any substantial evidence that has been shared by any of these product makers?
Japanese study is there on curcumin. It was
Yeah,
always there. In present times, also
yeah.
people have been referring to that. It is known to be beneficial, like the other micronutrients. Again, the logic being the same. These are all antioxidants. So the more antioxidants you consume, the more you prevent what is known as oxidative damage. So what you have to understand is, do they attack the virus? No. Do they reverse the oxidative damage of the organism? Yes. That's how these micronutrients work. They have a zero function against the microorganism, but they definitely have a lot of healing and lot of protective mechanism by the antioxidant properties they possess. So by giving them, you are supporting the body.
So that sort of bring me. This is a question from me. I mean, I know you would want to emphasize this is also has too much of antibiotic usage. Does it? What would you want to say in current scenario or otherwise? There is sort of a lot of usage of antibiotics sometimes without understanding. Of course, not with patients when they come to doctors like you, but there has been overusage. Can that sort of also bring down our overall immunity or make us more susceptible, even in COVID situations?
The second aspect of your question is very valid. Susceptible, yes, because what happens is the unwarranted use of an antibiotic actually causes resistance in the body. So then the organisms become resistant to it. You become more susceptible to that organism or other. So antibiotic resistant microorganisms is a nightmare for doctors. So warranted use of antibiotics is very, very essential. We are today in dealing with many viral infections. So many times in a viral infection, you may do away by not giving an antibiotic. We just treat by symptomatic measures. But sometimes we do need an antibiotic to cover, because a viral infection is like a fertile soil. A bacterial seeding can just happen anytime and then flare up the entire situation. So sometimes an antibiotic cover is essential. The way I see it is always and always, always send cultures before instituting antibiotic even on day one. Cultures are your safety net. If your antibiotic you have given is anyways not resistant, is not sensitive, sorry, to the organism, then you can change it as per the culture flora or the report. So first send a culture, then start a broad spectrum antibiotic if required, and then change as per the sensitivity report of the culture.
So I'm sure you will have to give an answer. There's a question saying many people are doing self-medication of azithromycin and FCQs. So what would you have to comment on that? Of course, you've already answered it kind of.
Azithromycin, surely don't self-medicate, please. It has very specific indications. Remember, I mean, everybody knew it. Allopathy comes with its own cup of problems, and that's a fact. So when it comes to all allopathy medicines, whether it's HCQS or azithromycin, it has to be only and only consumed if a person has been seen by a doctor and has been prescribed after consultation with a doctor. Please don't self-medicate, because they have their own set of side effects and problems. You may try to take it for something, and suddenly something else may happen, which at times can be life threatening also. So please don't self medicate.
There is a question from Prasad Charke. He's asking, I think this is more specific to your practice, is, what do you suggest diabetic patients to increase immunity? And generally, I think what is your suggestion for diabetics? Because that I think should come from you because staying home, whether they should visit you, they shouldn't visit you, what should they, what, this I think can help most of your patients to also know.
Right. So for doctors also, the new normal suddenly now is teleconsultation. The
Yeah.
Medical Council of India has gotten up and said that teleconsult is now legally approved. I think we see the logic in that ourselves. Not that we say that coming to the hospital is dangerous. We've never said that. But then, given the lockdown, given the social distancing, given the travel problems, we ourselves have resorted to teleconsultation. So diabetics can make use of this facility to the optimal, because compared to any other specialty, the diabetics, for them, teleconsultation actually can work, because you need to just log in, talk to your doctor, show them the reports, discuss your treatment going on, and as per the reports, all you have to do is tweak your prescription. So that's possible on a teleconsult. Wherever the doctor feels you need to visit, you need to visit. So that's one. Secondly, as you asked for a diabetic specifically, don't forget your annual vaccinations, please. We do advocate them in diabetics. So it's not that the vaccination is going to work against COVID. There's no specific vaccine for COVID as of now. But your usual flu and influenza vaccine, which have been recommended for you annually, take those. So at least you become less prone to those infections in these times. So that's one suggestion. Second, whatever we both have been talking about, nutrition, exercise, stress reduction, is very important for a diabetic to follow. Lastly, these are times of lockdowns and supply chain disruption. So try to keep an adequate stock of your medicines in your house. I've seen a lot of diabetics
Yeah.
unfortunately run out of medicines, and the local chemist really doesn't have immediately, them available. So keep a good stock, don't miss out on your dosages. Do home monitoring to a large extent. That also helps a lot in monitoring your sugars. So these are a couple of tips for a diabetic patient.
So on the contrary, on a positive note, also from my side, I'll input that, since we are on a lockdown, we exactly know what we're eating, and we are not eating food from outside. So maybe I think a lot of diabetics might have even benefited out of the lockdown, because you actually know how much spoons of oil you're putting, how much of sugar you're putting. So, design your diets and try to become more innovative in these periods, and you will sort of get more success when it comes to diabetics. And exercising, if you don't have anything to do, you can walk up and down in your house and count the number of times you're walking every day and keep stepping it up, and that can actually be very useful. So though you can't get downstairs, but we can do as much that we can at home.
I
So
think
that's
everybody is. The mopping of floors and dishes and drying of clothes and dusting the corners is an exercise as of now. So I think keep it up.
Yeah, I mean, we had a stroke patient 2 days ago, and he said, I'm so fine and fit now that I through the lockdown I even have done the utensils. So you can be rest assured that how fit and fine I am. Yeah,
Wonderful,
so
wonderful.
on a lighter note, but I think on that note, I think of course there's one more question also related to asthma patients, and yeah, it's kind of I'm not sure how much you'll be able to take it, but do asthma patients need to take any additional care through these kind of situations or for their
Yes.
immunity?
See, the point is, in present times, COVID-19 especially, it belongs to the family of SARS. So that's a respiratory virus, and the target organ which is damaged, or can get damaged in the lungs. So for an asthmatic or a COPD or a bronchitis patient, unfortunately for them, the lungs are a little compromised to begin with. So they have to be more careful in this season. Advice usually remains the same. Keep on consulting with a respiratory physician if there are symptoms. Don't sit on your symptoms for a long time. Immediately consult a respiratory physician. Breathing exercises help a lot. I mean, specifically asthmatic. We talk about nutrition and general exercise for everybody else, but then breathing exercise for an asthmatic are very, very essential. Do those, please. Vaccinations, yes, for an asthmatic, again, are very important. The annual vaccinations and pulmonary function tests also help to gauge the function of the lung. So these are a couple of tips for the asthmatic.
So while we are unlocking, I mean, I know we have been allowed for morning walks to go out for a stipulated time period. How safe will it be for patients with comorbidities? Would you still advise them or children to sort of step out at all during these times? I know children are not allowed right now, but can can what type of patients can easily go out, and if they should or if they should not?
See, the point is a couple of points here. So, very relevant question, honestly. So, for the concept of herd immunity to develop, you need obviously to be out a little. Okay,
Yeah.
if you lock yourself completely, then you're completely raw in the sense of exposure, and then suddenly one fine day an overwhelming exposure can be bad. So a little of exposure is important, and that little of exposure comes with all the safety measures which have been told to everybody up till now. So basically, social distancing, mask when you step outside, hand washing when you're back home or even outside if it's possible. So with that, venturing out, I think, could be safe as they're unlocking, primarily, but listen to the civic authorities. They are for our own good. If the
Yeah.
civic authorities give guidelines about particular things, we should follow them, because they're exactly taking into consideration these pointers, what's good for us and what's not good for us. Children, the saving grace of this virus has been that worldwide the incidence of pediatric affection, when I say affection, I mean both morbidity, mortality, and even a
Yeah.
mild infection, has
Yeah.
been less, 0.3% only worldwide, including India. So somehow the saving grace has been children are less affected. But having said that, yes, we need to be cautious in them. Whenever they're venturing out, even teaching them a proper wearing of mask. I see a lot of improper techniques in wearing a mask. If the nose is exposed, then it defeats the purpose. So wearing the mask properly, getting kids to wash their hands as frequently as possible, their nutrition, their exercise quotient, all has to have to be up to the mark to ensure their immunity remains well. So with these couple of pointers, I think we can safely and surely begin the
Yeah.
unlocking of this lockdown.
Any caveats that you would want to give your patients when they come to the hospital? Question I seriously, specifically want to address because to say so, I won't name where I've been going around. Just maybe one time that I was out, and after unlocking has started, people are not maintaining as much of. I mean, they could be social distant because there are less number of people, but they are not consciously following it. So, are there any caveats you would tell them to follow outside the hospital and when they are in also? Because that is
Right.
again very important.
So a very, very, very relevant and important question. See, again, a new normal for everybody, which is for us as well. One of the things of the Western countries which has always worked for them is an appointment schedule. In India, we honestly don't in any part of the country adhere to an appointment system. Doctors and patient themselves, we are more like a family. So, on a single phone call, if somebody wants to come, I would just say walk in. That was till 2019. 2020 has told us the importance of appointment, because the moment a slot is given for you, that means that slot is not given for anybody else. So the first thing I would request everybody, including the doctors and my colleagues and the patients, is adhere to the timing, to the appointment schedule, because that is prepared, keeping in mind social distancing. So when you come at your point in time, you are seen with no crowding around you. If you miss your time, then you're overlapping with somebody else, and that leads to crowding. So first is adhere to the appointment schedule. Second is, at every doorstep, obviously there are going to be thermo checks. Cooperate with the staff, because it's for your own good. And if a thermometer picks up a temperature, then obviously going to a separate section, getting the fever assessed over there is important. So irrespective of for what reason you have come to the hospital, if the thermo check has picked up a fever, then you need to first go to the fever OPD, get yourself assessed, and then come to the side of the hospital for which your primary come for. That's second. Third, your norms of mask are pretty important. I see a lot of people wearing gloves outside in public and society. Honestly, not required much. Most of the guidelines have said ki gloves gives you a false sense of security. What happens is, when you wear a glove, you feel the hand inside is secure. That's true. But then the gloved hand invariably does not get washed, or the gloved hand invariably does not get too much of sort of the alcohol-based gels applied to it. And then the same gloved hand is going to touch your mask, touch your mobile, touch your pen, touch your doorknob, touch your handle. So with the same gloved hand, actually you're then touching everywhere, and you just keep on feeling that the fingers are safe. So what we as doctors also feel is that a naked hand makes you consciously aware of the fact that you need to wash it, you need to apply some alcohol onto it to sterilize the hand. So a naked hand honestly is much more sort of more conscious to make you clean it quite a bit of time. So mask is the best thing. Beyond the mask, especially for lay people, I don't really advocate anything else. So these couple of pointers for patients as they come to the hospital.
So there are, I think I will also, because you're here, take the advantage of that because we still have that much time. We're going to ask you questions on COVID directly also because we know that you have been now. This was a session I think we had scheduled 2 months ago, but we didn't do it for the rightful reasons because there was too much confusion at that moment, and we decided mutually to call it off. But maybe a few questions on that. So before that, there is one question on ashwagandha, that if it can be useful. From my end, of course, there are immunomodulatory effects that ashwagandha has, and it has been observed to sort of help combat infections. Though there aren't extensive amount of studies, but there are a good amount of studies, and it has been advocated today to be used. If ask me, I would say ashwagandha is a good idea to consume. It is kind of known as the Sanjeevani Booty, if you call it. And world over, ashwagandha is more accepted than India. So ashwagandha also has, if you have pain or fever, it also helps in those kind of conditions to keep your symptoms low also. So it's a good idea to consume it. Someone also has a question on how much of apple cider vinegar we should consume. Honestly, my opinion is you can use it as salad dressings or small amounts. I wouldn't suggest you consuming it as if you're consuming medicine, because another thing which has been traditionally used, but not traditionally used as an overdose for killing any sort of infection. So yeah, use it with caveat, and again as a type of food that you consume every day in day out, but don't overuse it. So those are my answers. And when we are talking about immunity, and of course now COVID-19, what is it really different sort of when it comes to COVID-19 compared to the other corona series of viruses? Is it different from any other viral infections? Because people won't even common people wouldn't even understand that corona, COVID-19 are different, and sort of virus are different. But if you can give us an overview. I mean, I know, of course, we won't need whatever you want to tell us again.
See, the only difference is it's new. If you see the initial name into December 2019 when it first came out was novel coronavirus. So the word novel itself meant it is new to us as humanity and our immune system. So I would want to tell everybody that even for the cavemen in ancient mankind, when even the common cold virus must have first been sort of affecting them, it must have caused a lot of massacre, unfortunately. That's what is with these viruses. The differentiating feature amongst COVID-19 and the earlier virus infections is that our immunity has already sort of been exposed to the other viral infection, and we know in a way how to sort of respond to it. As I've talked in the between about memory, immunity, and all that. COVID-19 being a completely new kind of infection, the immunity doesn't know. It's a hidden threat. It's an invisible enemy. So when it enters the body, the immunity has to figure it out, find it out, and then attack it. So in that interim, what's make it really a dangerous kind of infection. So the moment it is here and it's in a part of the society and it's sort of here to, yeah, like the H1N1 infection, once it was a part, an integral part of society, then the immunity has known it, and then it will not be as big a threat as the other viruses. That's the only difference. It's a new virus, and therefore it's taking some time for us to respond and develop an immunity towards it.
So, uh, do you sort of feel that in general, as it has saved the kids, it has also been a little lenient on the Indians for any? Is that an observation, or is there any reason that we could speculate on?
Wonderful question. That's actually one of the research papers I am reading up, following up, and I wish to keep on following this particular because, as you rightly said, unfortunately, the have borne the brunt of this virus to a very large extent. Japan, to an extent, India, and most of the Southeast countries, not as large as mortality, I would say, compared to the Westerners. So they were up till now, whatever has been studied are these regarding why is it so. So one is a big factor of obesity. A lot of Westerners, Europeans, and American Britishers, unfortunately, are on the obese side, and obesity has been a major risk factor towards affection of COVID-19. That's one. Number two, the sterility concept is also one concept where the multiple organisms within a system try to latch on to the same available receptors on a human cell. So when you have multiple organisms, like example in Southeast countries, our gut unfortunately swimming with E. coli and typhoid
Yeah.
and so
Yeah.
many organisms. So they're all trying to latch upon the same cells really, and then that leads to what is known as a competitive inhibition, a concept of competitive inhibition where you have finite number of receptors they can latch on, and you have many more organisms available. So COVID-19, the poor thing tries to fight itself with the other organisms and find a latch on, and sometimes it can't. So
Yeah.
that in a Western population in India, because of the sort of infections around us, has in a way given us a little of benefit. That's what the second theory is. These are all theories, by the way.
Yeah. Yeah.
Third theory is about the genetic makeup. Somewhere at a DNA level, this virus was more causing more affection of the European or the Caucasian race compared to the Asian population. Why so? Probably in the years to come, as they decode the genetic makeup of this RNA virus, we'll come to know. That's third. And fourth, it has been seen that usually in the Southeast Asia countries, still the practices of folding your hands while greeting somebody, or
Correct.
in the Arab countries of not really shaking hands and stuff, has worked in a way for us. The Westerners were a lot into handshaking and those. So that has also in a way led to a quicker contact generation and a quicker spread. So these are a couple of theories doing the rounds. Probably another 6 months. So when we have known the virus for a complete year, we'll know for sure why in a way in us the affection has been less. But I'm good. I'm happy that the affection has been lesser.
Yeah, and then in terms of your second theory, sort of sounded very interesting. That just an observation, because when I lived back in the West, and when I used to come back home, I remember one of the instances, having just coming back from the airport to home, I contrasted a bad viral which is going taking rounds in India at that time. Could be because my receptors were open to it, having lived there. We never know, but
True.
very very interesting to know this from you. And then also the mortality, given whatever numbers we have right now, the mortality also seems to be a little bit under control uh, compared to the horror stories that are getting shared on the WhatsApp university, and in general, despite the fact that there's so much control on the WhatsApp share forwarding. Is there anything behind it also?
Uh, uh, WhatsApp University, I think it's an epidemic. We as medicos we were discussing among ourselves that what was the difference in the H1N1 epidemic and the COVID-19 epidemic, and the answer surprisingly was WhatsApp. In 2008, we didn't have WhatsApp at all. So I think that in a way helped. I mean, it's a phenomenal source of
Yeah.
information sharing, but then unfortunately, that information sharing many a times is not really authentic, leads to much more fear and concern than maybe allaying fear and concern rather. So
Yeah.
I think social media has its own pros and cons. People should really really think twice before forwarding something. They should do the background check. In fact, at this note, let me say here that people should be all the audience who are listening into us should keep their sources of information authentic. And to name a few, CDC, Center of Disease Control in the US, World Health Organization, WHO, and for the Indian context, ICMR, Indian Council of Medical Research. So if you go on to the websites of these predominant health agencies, at any point in time, you'll get real-time, authentic information in a very user-friendly language. So my request is you visit these websites for information, not the WhatsApp University.
Okay, since you have mentioned ICMR, a question regarding ICMR is like, we hear that they have the antibody test apparently ready, and they're going to probably announce the formalize the usage of it. Do you have any information on that, which is
Yes.
shareable?
Yes, so that has come in a couple of weeks in the past that they are formulating it. It's it works both the ways. The Spanish government had it sort of sanctioned many couple of months prior for their healthcare workers, because those who have an immunoglobulin level IgM in their bloodstream were actually asked to come back and work, because that means the immunity has developed. So that's how the concept of these immunoglobulin test is going to be to find out whether the immunity has developed. There are going to be two kinds of these tests, IgM and IgG. IgM is for an acute infection which is ongoing as of now, so that means you're ineffective, and IgG levels would mean that you have been infected and the immunity has developed. So still it's not a commercial kits are not available in the market. Very soon they should be, and then it will add to our testing modality. It's not going to ever replace the existing one. is going to add to it. So then as a doctor, we have a variety of to pick and choose in a relevant patient, which is the most relevant test to be sent. At times, maybe even a couple of them to counter check each other.
Uh, Last few questions. One, of course, on the context, since you have worked for long years also in the UK, and I'm sure you might be interacting with your colleagues there. How has it been in terms of treating this disease out there? And because we know that in the initial period they did go the herd immunity way, and then decided to go back on it for obvious reasons that it was affecting people. Uh, any insights from from there that you could suggest for the of course the normal people? Because this morning I did, of course it was WhatsApp University, but I did see a video on Germany, and I've been following a little bit on the Germany front also. They've actually managed the disease much better than any other country in the world, because their mortality rates are the lowest, their numbers are dropping. They had huge numbers in the beginning. So any inputs you would want to share from the Europe or
Uh,
UK?
Two things. If taken in the right perspective by the listeners, that maybe my point will be well taken.
Hmm.
One, civic responsibility and social discrimination.
I'm
These are
glad
the
you
two
say that.
things. These are two things with the Western community.
Yeah.
Honestly, having lived there and having studied there and having even friends even now. So when I compare us to them, everything else that we've done is at par. Our medical standards, our healthcare system, and everything is at par. But somehow, civic responsibility means, as I mentioned somewhere in a couple of minutes ago, that in the Western society, rules are followed. We have people even today flouting the rules the moment an opportunity arises. That's not right. If you need to be safe as of now, please follow the rules there for your own benefit. That's one major thing I think we could learn, take a leaf from their side. And second, as I mentioned, in our society, unlike the West, today I see still a lot of discrimination in the sense of a healthcare worker staying in a society or a complex is looked differently in COVID times. COVID positive patient, if he's asked for a quarantine in the society or the housing complex, he is looked upon with discrimination, ostracization. His family is ostracized, which I believe has should not happen at all. These are blots on our Indian tradition and values. We aren't like this. We should really be much more mature to behave like this. So if we have to actually take a leaf out of the Western literature, I can only see these two areas of civic responsibility. We can be better, and social discrimination should not happen. We should be observing social distancing. Nobody mentioned social discrimination.
Yeah, like the other day, Dr. Tivaskar was on our show. He just named it differently. He said, "Call it physical distancing. Don't call it social distancing at all." We can always catch up with our friends on Zoom or on phone or whatever. We don't need to stay away from them, but need of the hour is that social distancing is extremely important. I know this question has come up so many times because I know the government has sort of announced this the arsenic to be consumed, and I don't know if you have any views on it, but I think that question is for me. But if you want to add anything, and then I can take it also.
Uh, Again, I mean, probably Rajeshri would be much more capable of answering. I am not an expert in that field. All I can say is take it only with prescription. It's a medicine at the end of the day. It's not like having a fruit where anybody can have it with or without a prescription, but it's a medicine. Go to the expert, and if the expert, after analyzing you, your symptoms, and your background, feels you should have it, then and only then you should have it. That's what my take up on it is.
And what about probiotics?
Oh, they're more than welcome. We gave it up. Again, as I said, the buttermilk should have been the integral part of Indian diet always. Somewhere in 21st century, our generation has given up buttermilk. So probiotics have been
Yeah,
wonderful. We all should get back to the habit of that curds and buttermilk in our
yeah.
integral part of our diet.
So absolutely right, and I think probiotics really are pretty much welcome. As even I was going to say, it's overall going to improve your gut health as well. So also will improve your nutrition to nutrients. So what actually gets absorbed in your body will also improve. So that will obviously help fighting the infection also. So I think from that perspective, probiotics are important, but also make sure that prebiotic, that is a fiber consumption, is necessary, because that will help multiply those into numbers. The My answer on the arsenic front again is weigh the side effects with the effect. And as Dr. Amit said, bang on, take a prescription, and without which I don't think we should be just anything for that matter. Even nutrition should not be just consumed just because you think, unless it's under RDA and safe to be consumed. Please don't self-prescribe anything for yourself. I want to share a personal experience here when it comes to nutrition, and I thought I should do that. Is I had similar kind of symptoms in January, and I know now the discussion is doing rounds. When I initially started it, it looked like it was only me, but 6 weeks of dry throat and very similar symptoms to COVID. But what helped for me is it can look like a promotion that I'm doing, but I was consuming something which had vitamins, minerals, and electrolytes together, and some of these herbs like ashwagandha and boswellia together. So green tea. Having consumed that twice a day, I can tell you when I used to consume those, it really kept my dry throat well, kept that energy levels going. Personally, it helped me keep going for those days. And maybe we went through COVID, we don't know. We were not taking rest because we didn't know we are going through bad infections. So we were doing our usual activity. So these kind of hydration techniques with the right vitamin C's, again, it didn't contain super high levels of vitamins and minerals, but to keep the energy and the immunity boosted, it really helps. So that's one suggestion, because I think people are hearing that can actually help them. What's your take on protein? Because that's another thing which I think helps a lot. And we have seen that it helps in hospital recoveries as well. So is that something which you would advise,
Uh,
given that Indian population is always a little low on protein intake? What do you think?
yes, yes. By medical definition, proteins have been the building blocks of the human body. That's how, when I remember my physiology days in first MBBS, proteins amongst the other nutrients were defined as a building blocks of the human body. So everything that we've spoken so far, whether it's immunity, whether it's any other thing in the human body, is basically amino acids and proteins brought together, and brick by brick, just like how a wall is made, proteins make up all these things in the human body. So protein intake is extremely important. Having said that, I think it's essential for natural supplements first, and therapeutic ones only if the need arises, if the natural ones
Correct.
aren't required at that point in time. So keep your intake of veg protein sources, non-veg if you have non-veg in
Correct.
your diet up. That is going to be the most easy way of digesting the natural protein as well, and it will definitely help on protein in immunity building as well.
So I think we've covered most of the aspects of how we could keep fitter towards, keeping boosting our immunity, which normally we wouldn't have done. And very in-deep insights about immunity from you, Dr. Amit. I think we would want to close the session at this point, and if you can give your final insights, and maybe then I can close the session, thanking the viewers.
Final inputs can be just the same. Stay home and stay safe has been the mantra up till now. I would go one step further and say that if you're getting out, follow the norms which are there in place: the mask, the hand hygiene, the social distancing, and all, which again will keep you safe. And lastly, don't forget these three things of immunity boosting mantras, which are your stress reduction, which are your nutrition, which is the exercise. Follow them, and I'm sure we will win this entire epidemic and this outbreak, and we'll emerge victorious at the end of it.
I would also end the session by saying those three things, that you have to be physically active, you have to be nutritionally fit, and the mental fitness, which is extremely important. These three put together, even WHO says that health is the state of complete physical, mental, and social well-being, and not merely the absence of disease or infirmity. So I think we should sort of follow that. And I keep mentioning the statement which Sadhguru says, that if you want to sort of live well, you have to be lively. So be lively, go out there, being physically and mentally powerful, and just face it. But with all the caveats of, I would say, social distancing, and taking as much care of yourself, and not venture out if it's not needed. Having said that, I think I would like to thank all the viewers for coming and watching us and asking all those questions and encouraging us every time. And obviously, we have to big thank you to Dr. Amit Saraf. He's been having his hectic routine, of course, and he could take out more than an hour for us. So thank you so much.
Pleasure.
And with a promise that, you would sort of come up and give the viewers more insights on anything that comes up or anything that you want to tell them.
Absolutely. Looking forward. Thank you, Rajeshri. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much. Okay. Bye bye, everyone. And
Bye-bye.
stay home, stay safe.
Thank you.